So id3as was founded as a consultancy, essentially, 14 years ago, working with large-scale media customers like Nasdaq / Notified, DAZN. And id3as really made its name building high reliability, high availability custom live workflows. Their slogan used to be, and we still use it sometimes, is good on a bad day. The challenge is that if you're a consultancy, every time your customer needs a change, every time your customer wants to add a feature, they have to come to you. And so we looked for a way to productize the technology and the expertise that we built over those 14 years. And that product is Norsk.
Literally broadcasters, exactly the sort of people you guys would think about when you hear the term. Very much tier one, very much those that are delivering premium content to their viewers, especially if they're looking to monetize it. Norsk is a very good fit for live. And there's a really good fit if there's a progression from traditional sort of broadband type broadcast over to IP. There's a very good fit for IP just there.
Live sports, live news, enterprise content for businesses, town halls, that sort of thing, financial news. And then, obviously there's a myriad of other types of live video out there, but those are the ones that jump to the forefront of my thinking.
So Norsk comes in two parts. What are they and how do they work together?
So there's Norsk Manager and there's Norsk Media. We're not going to talk a lot about Norsk Manager here, but Norsk Manager is exactly what it sounds like. It's an infrastructure manager that takes care of managing your on-site, hybrid, or cloud infrastructures. So if you've got, let's say, 2 instances in the cloud and one fails, it will automatically fail over to the second one and your event will continue almost seamlessly. The focus that we're really emphasizing right now is Norsk Media, which itself comes in 2 parts.
The Norsk SDK, which allows you to use a low-code paradigm. So here's pretty much the simplest Norsk program that you can write. This one simply grabs an input SRT feed and defines an output WebRTC stream and connects the two together. And then there's a second stage which we're introducing at NAB in the next few weeks, and that's Norsk Studio. So Norsk Studio really takes the paradigm another step further and creates a no-code environment.
This is Norsk Studio. When you first load it, there's an empty workspace in the middle with nothing on it, and we have a pile of nodes on our left-hand side that we have already built in advance. So for example, I can drag and drop an SRT listener onto there. I can take an encode ladder, select some resolutions, optionally choose some hardware to use for that ladder, and I can drag and drop between the nodes and gradually build up a workflow. So obviously I need some kind of output. WEP is a good place to go. Obviously I require the audio from the original source as well. There we go. And when you've built a workflow like this, you can test it locally. So that's me spinning up a workflow. And if I send a source at that, now it's all alive. And I can go look at the live web output of my workflow there, and that's the whole thing running. Each of these is a little bit of code using our SDK. It's possible very easily to create new versions of any of these things to do pretty much any task. So this one has an SRT input, which allows 3 different cameras to connect, and I've dragged and dropped some previews for those cameras onto my workspace. I've got a multi-camera selection tool here for choosing which one's live and a preview of that. I've got a lower third component here which can render some news banners onto that. Then I've got my ABR ladder, and then I'm outputting to HLS and Dash, as well as doing a WebRTC output. Just spin that up over here. I'm going to start my sources. The previews spring into life, and I can indeed come over here and use the UI to select which one's live. This component here ships with a more full-featured UI and can serve effectively as a Vision Director interface for controlling which camera is live. But there's nothing stopping you building additional UI alongside that can be served and accessed on that environment, separate to this workflow here. So you can build UIs around the SDK that don't exist in this visualizer and use them.
How would you fill in logic that wasn't included in any of the components that were available on the left-hand side of the screen?
These components are really easy to author. They're just a small collection of JavaScript and HTML, and they can, within reason, do anything you'd like them to do, either with the SDK or outside the SDK, such as talking to in-house APIs or services. Each of these files over here contains a complete description of what needs to happen to make this event run. And that file in its entirety can be sent over to the Norsk Studio runner, which can spin that up next to a Norsk instance and instruct that what to do. So running this in production is just sending over that one file. A typical infrastructure for deploying Norsk and a Norsk Studio environment would comprise of a simple 2 Docker image compose file, which runs Norsk and runs the Studio environment with the file that you've sent over. So this is quite familiar to most organizations already, because it's how they're deploying applications to both their internal clouds and public clouds.
With Norsk, you get the shorter time to market and lower cost of the off-the-shelf solution, as well as the customizability and flexibility of rolling your own without the very lengthy time to market and and all the cost that goes with that. And as you said, you get access to all of these capabilities and functions that really aren't available from any other single solution right now.
So Norsk is really rich. There's a lot of functionality in Norsk. It's all set in the doc, so I'm not going to go and read the whole lot. But certain things that would spring out to broadcasters, things like SCUDI35 management, so both processing of inbound SCUDI35 markers and injecting outbound markers to manage your whole ad insertion and monetization process. DRM, that's an important thing. KLV metadata, that's something you rarely see available, but for where you've got streams coming in, particularly in sports, motor racing, that sort of thing, you may well want to do some metadata enhancement out on the client end, and we can pass all that stuff through. HDR metadata, closed captioning, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I think one of the key bits is flexibility. So Norsk has a lot of function out of the box, and that's function that's increasing almost on a daily basis, it feels. And you can get to that through both the low-code SDK and increasingly through the no-code studio. And it gives you massive flexibility as to what you want to do. So you're not locked into designing your workflow up front, buying a whole bunch of tin to run that workflow, and then sitting back and in 6 months going, I wish we could do X because we've got this new customer requirement, but unfortunately the boxes we've chosen and the way we're wiring them together means we can't do that, and we're going to have to wait for our next refresh cycle, which could be 3-4 years away. Your ability to scale out to the cloud, Norsk will happily run on cloud, happily run on-prem. That's a big win. So particularly if you've got spiky workloads, I think if you're running 24/7 type infrastructure, having a local tin makes a lot of sense. Cloud isn't the cheapest way of delivering things, but as soon as you've got any level of spikiness, then being able to scale those spikes out to the cloud so that you're only having to run your day-to-day stuff locally, that's a real big win. You're on a single server. Instead of these big chains that we described earlier, you can get it down to one box. So things like latency, you're now down to your slowest step as opposed to the sum of all your steps. Along with that, you're getting better density in your rack space and stuff like that. So if server rooms are crowded things, your IT team will be very happy if you can free up room in their racks because they're pretty much in demand. Lower capex, absolutely. Lower power, almost certainly. Obviously, you're still doing some of the work. It's not free, but there's a lot of redundancy you have when you go down the multiple appliance route, which you get to save on all of that stuff. Your flexibility around the hardware is great. Norsk runs on commodity hardware. You buy a regular server. If in 6 months' time you want to plug in some AI system and that would need an NVIDIA card or some other AI accelerator, it's just a regular server. You can just go get that stuff, plug it in, off you go. Whereas an appliance-based model, those tend to be very much more locked down. You don't have those choices.
So ultra high availability has to be the sort of platform on which you build your media services rather than a thing that you fit to media services afterwards. So we use slightly esoteric programming languages which allow us to focus on hyperscaling and on supervision of millions of processes and having strategies for dealing with what to do if something does go wrong, because it will go wrong, and it doesn't matter how much you set yourself out to build a system which never goes wrong. Once you've done this a little while in your life, you know that you can't do that. You have to have a strategy for every failure. So yes, if you want to really offer service level agreements that are higher than the infrastructure on which you're running the service, you need to have a strategy. And that's baked into the very DNA of Norsk.